Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. This is the first rest day Giro d'Italia 2022. Now, we saw a spectacular finish and a stage win of stage 3 from Mark Cavendish and Quick-Step. They did a fabulous job. They had 4 guys with 1.5 kilometers to go that did the bulk of the work to deliver Mark Cavendish to that fantastic win. When we go back and dissect that stage finish from 2.6 kilometers out, I want to point out that at this point in time, Alpecin-Fenix have 7 riders at the front of the group, and the only rider missing up there is Sine Leisen, who had been riding the front of the peloton throughout most of the early parts of this stage. So when you get this far into the stage with only 2.6 kilometers to go, you have 7 guys on the front. That's great numbers. It's still early at 2.6 kilometers to go, but when you have 7 riders, I'm okay with this. This looks fantastic. And you got to remember, one of them's Mathieu van der Poel. If we go back to earlier races in 2022, and I point out Remco Evenepoel, there was points in times where Remco Evenepoel for Quick-Step was doing 4-kilometer pulls at the front of the group. So when I point out Mathieu van der Poel in this group here of 7 left from Alpecin-Fenix with 2.6 kilometers to go, the firepower is immense in Alpecin-Fenix team when we're talking about being able to finish off a stage win here for Alpecin-Fenix for Marichko. Now, Marichko's young kid, I had to look up his resume. He has a ton of victories, but they haven't come at this big level here when you're talking Giro d'Italia. But clearly, with his stage finish yesterday, we see he did a solid result at the finish, even though he didn't have any help. Now, 2.6 kilometers got a lot of help. He's solidly on the wheel, and up front, they have Dries de Bont, first position, Tobias Bayer, second position, Oscar Riesbeck, Alexander Kruger, Mathieu van der Poel, Jakob Marichko sitting on Mathieu van der Poel's wheel, and Stefano Oldani is the sweeper there for Alpecin-Fenix. Now, I want to really dissect Alpecin-Fenix because when you look at this with 2.6 kilometers to go and see this much power, there's no point in time that you should say to yourself, Mathieu van der Poel did a great lead-out job here on stage 3. And that's what Sean Kelly said later. If you watch further past the finish of yesterday's stage 3, Sean Kelly says that Mathieu van der Poel was perfect in his lead out. He wasn't perfect. In fact, he was outright terrible in his lead out for Marichko here on stage 3. And I'm going to point out a bunch of different things. Now, I left all the jerseys up here. They're all the domestique years that I raced in the U.S. And at all those years, for all these teams, I had to do lead outs. Every criterion we did. Every race we showed up for, we're racing for prize money. No one in the racing on the U.S. domestic scene is getting paid a lot of money, so prize money is big. You have to be perfect. You have to win the sprints because 90% of what we're doing in the domestic U.S. scene is sprint finishes in order to make prize money. So when I look at my time here at Mercury, when I was leading out Gord Fraser, it's what I did day in and day out. So when you hear Sean Kelly talk about Mathieu van der Poel being perfect on stage 3, I'm here to race any of that. He wasn't perfect, and the whole team fell apart. And you'll see the reasons why as I dissect it here going into the stage. Now, Dries Bump continues to pull on the front until 2.5 kilometers to go, and Tobias Bayer will take over, and he'll pull to about 1.5 kilometers to go. The problems start, though, really is when UAE Team Emirates slide past on the left side of the wheel sweeper, Stefano Oldani. Oldani needed to close that gap just a little bit to the left of the road there and keep the UAE Team Emirates team from trying to come up the left side. Instead, he doesn't close the gap, and UAE Team Emirates will slide up with about 1.6 kilometers to go. I'm going to back the film up just a little bit further and go to 1.9 kilometers to go because this was the absolute last time that I had seen Mathieu van der Poel look back over his shoulder to see where his sprinter Marichko was. This is a big problem. This is the difference between great lead-out guys and not great lead-out guys. A great lead-out guy will look over his shoulder at all the crucial moments throughout the finish of the stage. Now, I'm only watching what the cameras are showing us. So, of course, there could be other times when Mathieu van der Poel looked over his shoulder. And if there was other times that he looked over his shoulder, then you know for sure he's doing a terrible lead out here on stage 3 because he would have known that he didn't have his sprinter next to him. So remember, 1.9 kilometers last time Mathieu van der Poel looks over his shoulder for Marichko back there. Now, as we get further into it at 1.4, that's when we start seeing the De Koenig train come up the center and they start driving it fast. Davide Ballerini's doing an amazing job here. This is the point in time right here at 1.4 kilometers to go where Alpecin-Fenix need to be their strongest because, as I pointed out yesterday's butterfly effect, under the 1 kilometer banner is the roundabout chicane that's going to go off to the right. Alpecin-Fenix at this point in time, they need to know in the meeting from this morning that the most crucial part of this race to win this stage is making it through this roundabout and coming out in the front position. Now what happens before the roundabout as Quick Step pull hard to the right, the other teams, Alpecin-Fenix, are going to go to the right too. And we're going to see at this point in time, we're going to see Mathieu van der Poel locked in the middle between Mark Cavendish and UAE Team Emirates, who have passed up on the left side now because Alpecin-Fenix followed over to the right side of the road, and now that's causing their sprinter back there, Marichko, to start getting blocked in, and he's starting to lose the gap in the space of the wheel there of Mathieu van der Poel. At that point in time, Mathieu van der Poel has still not looked back to see where his sprinter is, and he's fighting for position up there. Now when the cameras go forward before the roundabout, it's Quick Step going full flight with Davide Ballerini into the roundabout chicane after 1 kilometers to go. This is where all hell broke loose back there for Alpecin-Fenix. They're going into the roundabout. Just before that, they had the lead. They lost it to Quick Step. They're going into the roundabout now, and they're getting surged from guys from behind with UAE Team Emirates and Biniam Girmay starting to make some progress as he's coming out of the roundabout. When we exit the roundabout with 900 meters to go, Quick Step is on the front with Davide Ballerini, and he's going to pull off. When he does, Alpecin-Fenix rider Alexander Kruger now takes over the front and starts leading the train. This was a bad time to take over the front because if you look at this picture, you have Alexander Kruger on the front, followed by UAE Team Emirates. Then Mathieu van der Poel is fighting for the wheel of the UAE Team Emirates with Fernando Gaviria, who is UAE Team Emirates. At this point in time, again, if you're doing a perfect lead out and you're Mathieu van der Poel, there's no reason you'd want to put yourself in front of Fernando Gaviria with only 700 meters to go in the stage. If you're getting in front of Fernando Gaviria and you're Mathieu van der Poel, what are you thinking at this point in time? Where is Marichko at? If you just got in front of Fernando Gaviria, could Marichko possibly be on your wheel? No, absolutely not. So at that point in time, once you won the fight for the UAE Team Emirates, Ricchese's wheel there for third position and Fernando Gaviria is behind you, at that point in time, you got to pull the plug. Now, we'll go a little bit further into the stage, into the finish here, and behind you're going to see Marichko back there, and Aldani will actually come up to the left side of Marichko. Now, at that point in time, that's going to start blocking the road for Marichko to be able to fly up the left side and get back up to Mathieu van der Poel's wheel. As a sprinter, the sprinter is going to look back there. As soon as he looks over to his left and sees Aldani there, he's going to assume that Stefano Aldani will do a big pull and bring him up to Mathieu van der Poel's wheel, who's in front of Fernando Gaviria. Instead, Aldani went up there, paused, and then dropped back. But by that point in time, now Marichko's already lost and isn't going to know what to do. So he's stuck there in the center of the road. Now, Mathieu van der Poel does another crazy mistake here because as the sprint is really starting to go full flight, Mathieu van der Poel is going to jump on the front and try to lead this sprint out with about 300 meters to go. He'll sit up quickly and look back and realize that Marichko is nowhere near on his wheel and he'll drop off to the left. As Cavendish has started his sprint and now the speeds are going maximum, Mathieu van der Poel is dropping back. When he drops back on the left side of the road, we're going to see Biniam Girmay slide between the gap of Marko Morkov and of Mathieu van der Poel. The problem is Marichko now is coming up so fast, but he's got Mathieu van der Poel there, his teammate and race leader here on the left side, and the gap is just not big enough there for him to slot between that same hole that Biniam Girmay just made it through. So instead, Marichko has to go right, then gets himself blocked in, has to slow down, wait for the gap to open up. When Markov drops back, he'll slot through that, and then we'll start seeing him moving up inch by inch on the left side between the barriers and the sprinters in front. He does a great job of getting top 5 here at the finish of stage 3 of Giro d'Italia. But when you really dissect it, when you look at Alpecin-Fenix's tactics, they just fell apart. Now, I don't know exactly how to fix it, but one thing's for certain. When you have the power of Mathieu van der Poel before that roundabout with about 900 meters to go under the 1K banner, that's where Mathieu van der Poel, if you don't have a teammate strong enough to hit out from that 1.4 kilometers when Quick-Step started their power train, that's where Mathieu van der Poel needed to be on the front, drive it into that roundabout, and basically dethrone the Quick-Step Davide Ballerini's chances of going into that roundabout first. If you use the power of Mathieu van der Poel before that roundabout, come out of that roundabout still pulling full gas, you have Stefan Oldani back there that helped do the lead out. Alexander Kruger, who looks solid in today's race, he could have done something out of that roundabout too. But really, when you see the finish of this stage 3 and you look at it and you simplify the breakdown of the sprint finish for Alpecin-Fenix, Mathieu van der Poel did nothing. He had a ton of power in his legs and a ton of ability to keep his sprinter Marichko out of trouble throughout the finish of this stage, but really did nothing. Every particular move that Mathieu van der Poel did here at the finish of stage 3 was the wrong tactic when you're trying to look after a young sprinter like Marichko back there. So when you hear the other commentators talk about how Mathieu van der Poel was perfect in his lead out, he wasn't. He did not do the right tactics on yesterday's stage 3, and that's why Marichko never had a chance at winning on stage 3. That and, of course, a fantastic Deceuninck Quick-Step team back there to be able to help lead out Mark Cavendish for the win. Now, when we start looking at the points competition here, I want to point one thing out. Beniam Girmay, whose Intermarché teammate looked after him perfectly all the way up until about 2 kilometers to go. Then he was on his own. He did a great job fighting for position, finished 4th on the stage, and in my book right now is the leader of the points competition. Could possibly be the strong favorite, I believe anyways, to win the points competition because he can climb and clearly he can sprint. So keep an eye out for what Beniam Girmay does on these next following sprint stages and of course the medium stages where he could steal some points from the other sprinters like Arnold Demar. Keep in mind, Mathieu van der Poel, his objective has to be the Tour de France that's coming up. He's won a stage here already. He's worn the pink jersey, so he's got to be happy. Probably do a week here, then drop out of Giro d'Italia and start getting prepared for the Tour de France. I believe Mark Cavendish will be out of the points competition here at Giro d'Italia because I believe Quick-Step have to take him to the Tour de France to try to beat Eddie Merckx's record. Now, on stage 4, when we're talking about the last summit climb of 22 kilometers long and over 6%, the tactics being played here are going to be interesting to watch because Ineos need to make up a lot of time on Simon Yates. Remember, Simon Yates won the time trial here on stage 2. He also went really well in the time trial at Paris-Nice. So when we look at the last time trial here on stage 21 of the Giro d'Italia, you got to believe that there's a solid chance that Simon Yates has the ability to put seconds, if not minutes, into the other GC favorites on the last stage here of the Giro d'Italia. So when we're looking at stage 4, the tactical game between all the GC climbers is really going to come into play on this first mountain summit finish because Ineos have a few cards to play. Ben Tullet, not certain of his possibility here of doing something great, but he's high up on the general classification, so Ineos can play him early, not early in the stage, but early in the climb, the final climb of stage 4. And they have Richie Porte along with Richard Carapaz. So they have 3 cards to play. In my book right now, when I'm looking at Bike Exchange, Simon Yates is their sole card to play. I know they have another top 5 on the general classification. Sobrero, he had a solid time trial on stage 2. But I really think Bike Exchange are left with one option to play. So they need to get him far up into this climb. And then if he really has good form, he should be able to protect himself the last 5 kilometers of the final climb on stage 4. Make sure you guys like and subscribe because the racing has just begun here at Giro d'Italia. And stage 4 should play out with an exciting GC final battle on the last climb here. Like and subscribe and I'll see you on the next edition of the Butterfly Effect.